only problem is that there appears to be something going on with regards to the HTML connecting these two things. So let's take a look at what that might be. There's some margin issue that is causing these three stories to appear and overlap my main or my featured area across the top. So if I look at this, why that might be, perhaps you're going to use the WebKit inspector frequently for this kind of stuff. Perhaps this content in the float left and float right. I'm looking at this and I see this negative margin 15px, and that's probably what's doing it. Well, I can't really get rid of that because I don't really want to get rid of it for most times. I just don't want to show this thing in edit mode. What I really want to do is I want to just add some extra padding in my home template when we're in edit mode so that this problem doesn't show up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some PHP code that checks to see whether the current page is actually in edit mode. And if it is, I'm going to add in a div that spaces things out a little bit nicer. So now if I refresh, you can see this looks a lot better. I can actually still edit everything. Looks exactly how it's supposed to. But if I exit edit mode, everything still looks exactly the same. I don't have any extra padding in my template when I'm not in edit mode. So that's a really good way to make your templates. You'll see these throughout certain templates where, you know, the layout is really tight and the concrete5 controls don't. Matt informed me that my audio cut out a little while ago. I think that might have been this handy mute button that my Logitech headset has that I didn't know existed until just 5 seconds ago. So I will keep that away from where it can accidentally be pressed. Thanks, Matt. And we will keep on with it. So I think what we were talking about was we were talking about how to continue making this homepage template look the way it does in this sample site. And that's basically by just going through index.html and continuing to copy out sections of the site, of the HTML. So again, what I said before that you guys might not have heard, it looks to me like the content that index.html uses toward the bottom for this about this free CSS template and this little section over here is actually a similar bit of HTML to the right sidebar page. I can tell that there's this content and this column class, so I pasted it down here. But since this is on a template that is on the home page, I don't really want to call it main and sidebar. I'm going to call it home sub, and then I'm going to call it home sub right, just because that seems sane to me. And I'm going to edit this page, and I can continue working with it. I can add in some content and a heading 2 and some more sample content here, and that looks pretty good. And then over here I can take a look at some of the HTML that this template is expecting. So it looks like it's some pretty basic stuff, but there's also this holder. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go back into home.php. I'm going to paste it in here. And we're going to, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do something a little unorthodox. We're going to call this home sub right up here. And then we're going to make another area right here. We're going to see how this works. We'll refresh this page. Looks a little strange, but we'll give it a shot. Call this latest news. Make sure that it is using heading 2. And we look at this. So far, so good. We'll look back at index.html. And we'll upload a little image. I will snag that image and upload it here. We'll add another little content block here, and we will add another image. And then we will add in some HTML. Oh, why is that way? It's a little weird. Strange. Then I will actually work on this image a little, this HTML a little bit, because I don't think it is actually working the way that this template requires. Looks like the image is right next to these things. Update that. Maybe that'll look better once I publish. No, that's not quite right, but you get the idea. If I were to actually handle this in concrete5, what I might do, since it's such an actual bit of since it's actually so layout specific, I might even say, you know what, I'm not going to use the content block for it because it's just too easy to screw up. Instead, I'm going to create a custom block that lets you choose an image, lets you choose a little content and link over to something, and then actually just gives you the just outputs the HTML exactly 100% how it's necessary. Because if you look at this, there's just too many ways to kind of screw this up. But that said, we've gotten 90% of the way here, and going pretty good. So now you can link on through to all these different stories, which we haven't completely built out yet, but the pages are there. They all contain content across the top. There's a contact us page on the site. The e-newsletter form at the bottom of the site works. Pretty cool stuff. And finally, before we take sort of some of the final questions in here, I'm just going to go through a couple miscellaneous topics. One thing you're going to want to do, sort of the last bit of really, there's two more things that you can include in your concrete5 theme. One of them is required, and the other is sort of strongly encouraged. The required one is called view.php, and it's sort of a similar file to default.php. It is used when certain elements in concrete5 aren't actually done with page types. They're done with things called single pages. And these pages actually exist outside of the theme, and they create their HTML, and then they take that HTML and inject them into the theme. So if you don't have a place for them to inject into, your theme will not work in that capacity, and it will be unhappy. For example, let's say I wanted to make my site not only show when I'm just browsing it, but I also wanted to actually make my login page work with my theme as well, so that when you came to log in, it actually looked like this. Well, I can do that, and we can go through sort of the syntax behind that at a later time. But if I did that, I'm going to get an error because I don't actually have the required theme in my file yet. So this is the type of thing you see when your file doesn't have view.php. It could happen for a number of reasons. Certain add-ons make pages that require view.php in your theme. It's really a good idea to have it in there. So it's saying view.php not found. All themes need default.php and view.php files in them. Consult concrete5 documentation on how to create these files. Well, today I am the documentation, and I will create the file for you. So to create this file, almost always the easiest way to do it is to take the simplest page on the page type in your template in your theme, the one with one or two areas, and you copy them. And that for us is default.php. And here's view.php. That's what you name it. And then you open this up, and then you typically find your main content area and delete it. And instead of that, you add the following PHP, print inner content. So when I say these single pages and things like that create their HTML and then inject them into the theme, they inject them into view.php in this location. So wherever you have this print inner content, that's where the content of your theme will actually be. That's where the content of the single page will be injected into. So now you can see when I come to my site and I log out, if I want to log in, if I come into that site, my login form is actually now displaying surprisingly well right within the theme that I just created. I don't have to create a page. I don't have to do anything other than make sure there is the correct, other than make sure that there is in fact the correct view.php file in there. So it's always a good idea to have. I'm going to undo that. And then finally, the next thing that is less required but still strongly recommended is the ability to specify a CSS file for your rich text editor. So you see right here, if I edit this here, it works just fine, and I get the HTML approximation of what I'm getting in there, but it's all, the typography is different, the background is white, the font sizing is way off. I really, if this were to be a kind of example or a approximation of what my site looks like, it's not doing a very good job. So that's why we have a file called typography.css. This file lives in the root of your site, and it just is a CSS file that is automatically loaded by your editor. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use layout.css as a starting point for typography.css. So I'm going to take that style, I'm going to paste it again into the root, rename it typography.css. And then I'm going to delete these things because they don't mean anything for typography.css. Delete the margin and padding because that's really not something this should override. But I'm going to keep font and color specific stuff the same. And you know, this actually works really well because it's already all pretty much set. I want to make sure that the links look correct, so I'm going to try and find link styles. I'll keep this link style up here. Delete this stuff because I don't think it really matters that much. Looks like we are in fact defining some header styles here. So I'm going to take these. This div wrapper has no context in the editor. So all of the styles that you're finding that your theme defines, like for wrapper divs and things like that, those don't have any, those aren't used in the editor at all. So you want to just get rid of them because they won't work. And then this stuff is not really useful for us. So we're going to get rid of it. Again, this is a breadcrumb section that doesn't really have anything to do with editable content. Neither does intro. Content. Let's check out what this has. Looks like this is defining the styles that work from within the content space. So that actually looks pretty good for us. And moreover, it actually looks like these are going to be used instead. So I'm going to just make sure that the important points get handled here. You can see this is kind of an organic process. You just pull the stuff from here that you think is going to be most important. And then I'm going to just call that good. We'll see what that does. Sometimes it's a little difficult for this to make it in there because the editor caches style sheets pretty good. But as you can see, when I fire this up for editing, it looks a lot closer to the site. You can see that the H2 tag looks solid. The line height is pretty good. If I edit this, you can see that I've got the right text color, stuff like that. If I edit this here, it's looking very, very close. Very, very good. Now, it's not perfect all the time because as you can see here, if I edit this, it doesn't really match the specific instance of content here, but it's really good for getting about 90% of the way there. If I go into the About section of the site, for example, and edit this, it's about indistinguishable. And if I were to even take this and resize it out, you can even get it down to the actual line that you've got there. And so that is typography.css. It is a highly recommended thing to add. And I think that about does it for this training. Does anyone have any questions? Be happy to take questions for a little while. Karen asks, the edit content block does not have color editing. Is there any reason for this, or was it selected in the dashboard? There should be some things in there, perhaps. So if I come in to edit content here, there should be some basic color controls here. This is background color for a bit of typography, and then somewhere else, where is it? Should be foreground color, I believe, right next to it maybe. So if I save that, it should work right there. There is a way of, if you head into the dashboard and you look in System and Settings for the Rich Text Editor, we are using this sort of standard concrete5 toolbar. There's an advanced one which adds even more stuff. There's the Office one, which I'm not totally clear on what it does. This is a tiny MCE setting, but it does add stuff like date and time. And then there's Custom, which is lets you, if you know what you're doing, specify exactly what you want. So you could remove color here completely, but I believe by default it should be in there. Matt asks, do the features associated with page type, like name, icon, meta tags, etc., have to be set on each individual site, or is there a way to set them up in the theme files prior to installing? Not really in the theme. You know, if you want to get into this, you can completely customize what gets installed into concrete5 and what defaults are in place. But to do that, you're going to need to investigate what we call starting points. And this is a new feature in 5.5, and it's there's 2 starting points by default. One is blank, which just installs the stuff that Concrete needs to function, like the dashboard and at least one page type and one theme. And then there's the sort of sample content with blog, and that is you know, makes a complete site for you. And that's all through some XML configuration, and you can customize how how sites get their sample content, but it is a little bit of a technical process. And there are packages that get installed at start time or install time. They're not exactly themes, but they can associate all that stuff. Faust asks, are there default names we should use similar to main for the main content editable areas as a best practice to make it easy to switch between themes? Just looking at some of the default themes, I see names as header, header nav, header image, sidebar, my site name, site logo, etc. Yeah, you know, some of those are a bit more, or some of those have evolved organically. I would say anytime you see my site name, that's sort of deprecated. My site name was a way for people to create, to sort of get around the problem of global content. So you could create a block in the old scrapbook and name it my site name, and then it would automatically show up on every page. But now we're really pushing global areas because they're much easier to edit and much easier for new users to understand. By default, let's take a look. Let's take a look here. In general, you want to use main instead of main content. In general, the simpler the area name, the better. If we look through Greek yogurt in header, site name, header nav, header image, these are all pretty good concrete5 conventions. Main and sidebar are strong conventions, and then I don't think there is a global footer in this one. But footer nav and footer copyright are pretty strong, pretty used. But yeah, definitely my site name is old and probably not something that you want to use anymore. But site name as a global area, definitely. And you know, if you're building a theme for your own custom project, this is less of an issue. Like you saw, I made up a lot of the area names on the fly today just based on how I was feeling. Faust, is there one for 3-column sites besides sidebar? Yeah, you know, I've seen a couple different conventions. I don't think there's any accepted standard for it necessarily. Like, we will typically, if one of the columns is really the obvious main content, like it's a bigger column than the other two, we make that one main, even though they're all columns. And then, you know, we might call it sidebar and then right sidebar, or sidebar 1, sidebar 2. It's really kind of up to you. Once you get into some more complex layouts, you can always download themes from the marketplace. Maybe some of those developers have accepted some, have decided upon some of that stuff. It would not surprise me if they have, but since they build more themes than we do these days. But as far as I know, when the layouts and themes get more complicated than sort of what we saw today, they there's less there aren't as many conventions. Any more questions? Well, I think that about wraps up the basic theme class. I think probably gave you quite a lot of info for, an hour and 45 minutes. But, it really doesn't take that long to really get a Concrete 5, to get an HTML theme into Concrete 5. We've got the advanced theme development training in 2 days. So if some of you guys are the same, I may continue on from here, and perhaps work at making some of those custom block types that work well in this theme. If it's a new class, I may overlap some of this stuff, but it's really going to be all about fine-tuning how to make a site that looks really great in a custom theme. All right, thanks everybody, and hope to see some or all of you on Thursday.